All right, so we're going to keep the conversation going today. And here's what I want you to consider. And I'm going to come back to this several times today because I really want you to consider it because it challenges us a little bit. But I think if we can grasp onto this, it'll help us to find some hope and some security when a lot of foundations seem to be shaken. Here's what I want you to consider today. Within the core of our being resides an ancient, persistent hunger to surrender our loyalty to something or someone worthy of our complete devotion. Now, if that rubs you the wrong way, you're normal. But I'm going to ask you to consider it today. That within you, within every one of us, within even the core of your being, is a hunger to surrender your loyalty. Because what we discover in Scripture, and what we just kind of know, is that we weren't really made to be God. Our guest speaker last week did a great job of talking about sin as this God complex that all of us carry within us, right? That you and I, we were created for a greater allegiance. We see it happening. We see it. We see folks looking for a cause that they can give an allegiance to. We see people looking to find a community that they can give their allegiance to, a community that is greater than them, to find a leader. Oh boy, that's usually what we do, right? Is we find a leader, and it seems like in election cycles, the way to pitch your candidate is to be the leader that we can all believe in, the leader that will lead us to a greater cause, and we will pledge our allegiance. And especially if that leader can protect us and lead us to a greater cause, that's even better. And the ultimate would be a leader with a cause who can create community. We will almost sell our souls to such a leader. Unless we don't like them, and then we mock people who do sell their souls to that leader. Or they're the other party that we didn't vote for, right? But let's get back to this core longing. Within each of us is this hunger to surrender our loyalty to someone worthy of our complete devotion. But that's the question, right? Who's really worthy of our complete devotion? Because we look at a leader and we think, okay, but can I trust them? Can I trust them to truly serve? Or are they going to do more taking than they give? And are they only in it for themselves, or are they really in it for us? Or are they just using us to benefit themselves? I'm ready for a greater allegiance, but I don't know who I can trust. Which is why we struggle with authority. Now, you might say, and I know, you'll come up to me afterwards, and you're going to want to say, Jason, the Bible just makes it clear. We all are just inner rebels. We all want our own way. It's called sin. You don't have to explain it with any other way. It's just sin. We're just rebels. I get it. And I agree with you, okay? But I do want to mine a little bit deeper. Like, is there more to it? Because if we were created to surrender our loyalty, and we have an inner rebel, and even at times when I want to surrender completely my loyalty to Christ, my King, but then why do I still even struggle with that when I know it's the right thing to do? Could it be that it's more than just my inner rebel? Could it also be my inner brokenness? To which attachment theorists speak up and they say, we've talked to a lot of people who have hurts and pains, and when we begin to hear about their stories, we discover that they have a lot of unmet needs when they look back. And Dr. John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, he would have said this. He did say this. He says, we're only as needy as our unmet needs. And so it's in regular that a good counselor therapist will say, tell me about your experiences growing up, and are there experiences you had where your basic needs were not met, and whenever your basic needs were not met, especially early on, and especially even in infancy. Attachment theorists are discovering that even in infancy, that the failure to connect and to experience safety and security from the people who are supposed to love you and provide safety and security for you creates a difficulty to connect and attach, resulting in a deep insecurity in which the voice in the back of your mind is telling you, I'm not sure anyone will really meet my needs for safety and security, and therefore I'm not sure I can surrender my loyalty, even to God the King. And so, yeah, there's an inner rebel in all of us. There's also quite a bit of inner brokenness in all of us. Steve Jobs, the famous genius founder of Apple Corporation, we give him the credit for, well, pretty much all of the technology in our lives. Invented the Apple computer in the 1970s, became famous, founded, and after the wild success of the Apple II, of course, then he went on to tackle his next project, and his big project that he thought was going to be the success was the Apple Lisa. And the Lisa was a really good idea, but it was very expensive and basically a failure. And so he recognized he needed a little bit of help, and so he went and found John Scully, then CEO of Pepsi Beverages, and he said, "Hey, John, do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugar water, or do you want to come change the world?" And he was like, "Oh, sounds good. I want to go change the world." And so he comes on Apple as the chairman of the board in Apple. And of course, Steve Jobs doesn't like things not happening his way. They tackle the next big project, which is going to be the Macintosh. Anybody remember when the Macintosh came out? Well, let's all date ourselves, all of us old people in the room. Okay, a few of us. The rest of us just don't remember. And they went and began to work on the Macintosh, and Steve Jobs, again, his own challenges and insecurities. It had to be perfect, and he was a micromanager, and people really didn't like working for him, even though he was a genius, and he was kicked off the Macintosh team. And then eventually he began to see that the company was starting to get away from him, and he began to have side conversations with all of the board members until one day in the boardroom, John Scully said, "Okay, we need to talk about this. Who's going to be the leader of the company, and who do you side with?" And Steve Jobs' boardroom coup failed, and he was kicked out of the company he started. As people look back and think back and try to think what happened, one of the things I recognize, unfortunately, is that Steve Jobs struggled to connect, and that his own origin story as a young child, not attaching, not having all of his needs met, showed up in his work life, and he was kicked out of the company he was founded. Because there is this connection between when I'm living with deep insecurities and I'm living with an insecure attachment. I'm not sure that I can trust people. When I can't trust people, then I definitely cannot surrender and will not surrender to any authority. I have to be in charge at all times. And a lot of times that means getting kicked out of the company we started, getting kicked out of the group or the team that we started, getting kicked out of the family that is ours. Steve Jobs, he's just a well-known example of someone who fits the description that when our needs for safety and security are not met, we will struggle with any authority. Now, add to that another layer. The layer of authority and anti-authority that we Americans believe that our origin story is based on rejecting the king, kicking out the king, and our origin story is like, we don't do monarchies. Went to Hamilton on Friday night. It was really fun. Do not expect me to start singing. No, it's not. Although I'm really tempted, right? Because the fool, if this the craziness of the musical Hamilton, is that the fool who provides the entertainment is the king. And flipping the script, right? Do you want to sing the song? You do. All right, here we go. Ready? Da 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 da. Nobody else knows it. All right, well, we'll sing it later. Yeah. Interesting that the king is the one who is mocked in the story, because we don't like kings, do we? We like self-governance. Especially the focus on self. What's really interesting, though, is that in most of world history, and most of the people who've lived in the world, monarchy and kings and submission to authority has just been assumed. That that's just how it is. In fact, it's been assumed that it's not just how it is, it's just how it should be. And we could debate that and argue that, but that has just been accepted. You fear the king, you obey the king. The king's job is to protect you, but you pay a high price for his protection and the safety and security that the kings provide. And you fear him, and you obey him, and you pay his taxes. And we grind our teeth at such an idea. And yet, I firmly believe within the core of our being resides an ancient, persistent hunger to surrender to something or someone worthy of our complete devotion. Now, some of you can already see where we're going with this. If the key word there is worthy of our devotion, who is worthy of our devotion, I would tell you. And today we're going to talk about, and for the next 4 weeks we're going to talk about, there is one who is worthy. And his name is Jesus. And the Bible describes him not only as the king, but as the King of kings, the king over all kings who have ruled, who are ruling, and who will ever rule again. His name is Jesus Christ, the ultimate king, and that he is the king we humans have been waiting for. So, I'm going to launch it today. And over the next 3 Sundays, this is going to lead us into Easter. And we're going to talk about Jesus is the King we have been waiting for. And to help us out with that, ushers, I think you guys have our little note-taking guides. If you could come at this time. And, if you have a little stack of papers, looks like this, come on up. Let's get those distributed. I'm going to give them to everyone. And inside, you're going to find it's very simple. There's 3 columns. And each week when we come, and you come to church next week, and the week after that, and then the week after that, the Sunday before Easter, I'm going to encourage you to just come to church, because we're going to fill up this page with what the Bible teaches us about King Jesus. And we're going to contrast Jesus the King with most kings who have lived, served, and reigned. And then we are going to ask ourselves the hard questions. As Jesus' subject, if Jesus is the king, and I believe that he is, I will what? What does that mean in my life? What does that look like for me? And we are going to go into Easter. And as we go into Easter, I want you to be thinking and praying, because here's what we're going to talk about on Easter. It'll be kind of the culmination, and we're going to land on it. But here's what we're going to share on Easter, because on Easter, we just know we're going to have a bunch of people who this might be their only time they're going to hear about Jesus all through the year. And so we're going to maximize that. And on Easter, we're going to talk about how Jesus is the God you can trust. We're going to come back to this issue of trust. Because I just believe society-wide, we're all asking, who can I trust? Who's worthy of my trust? Who is trustworthy? And so we're going to come back to that on Easter. And I want you to pray and be thinking about who in your life is struggling, living with an insecure foundation, wondering if they can trust anybody, who really need to hear the good news that they can trust Jesus, who is the one who can be fully trusted. All right, so we're getting them distributed here. Make sure that we get up to the balcony as well. All right, so if you have yours, and don't worry, I'm going to put the first one, the first blank to fill out, we're going to put it on the screen, and then we're going to come back to it, so you'll have plenty of time to get it. But if you will, Cliff, let's go to the next slide here. Most kings do what? Most kings will settle for outward compliance. Because that's all that they can do. They can demand that you obey, that you comply, that you follow the letter of the law or the rules. They can demand outward compliance. Jesus the King, and here's where I'm going to push you and challenge you a little bit. Jesus the King requires radical surrender. This is not easy to hear, is it? Because we don't like anybody wanting, even asking for radical surrender. We especially don't like somebody requiring radical surrender. Most kings settle for outward compliance. And if they can get people to comply, at least outwardly in actions, they're going to settle being good enough for that. Jesus goes beyond that. Jesus says, I am the king, therefore I require radical surrender. So in the Bible, in the Gospel of Luke, right before the story that we just read earlier, where Jesus goes into town riding on the donkey, and he leaves his followers with this just like crystal clear mental image of Jesus as king riding a donkey. Right before that, he teaches through a parable, which is simply a made-up story that it is taught and told to prove a point. Here's the parable, okay? And it's there's parts of it that are not easy to read, but it is from the mouth of Jesus. So here we go. Luke chapter 19, starting in verse 11. While they were listening to this, I mean, this is like right after Zacchaeus. Like he's probably getting done with dinner with Zacchaeus, and they're walking out, okay? And while they were listening to this, Jesus went on to tell them a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and the people thought that the kingdom of God was going to appear at once. So they're like, the kingdom is here, and it's going to show up, and it is here, and we're all going to see it, and we're all going to fall down before King Jesus, and we're going to kick the Romans out, and life is we're going to have like self-rule, self-governance, and Jesus is going to be our king. It's going to be wonderful. So Jesus tells them a story. He said, a man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. You see it in your minds? The story's going to shift a little bit. I want you to lose this part here. A man of noble birth, he went off to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. Okay, what's Jesus? I just want you to see multiple layers of meaning here. What's Jesus going to do? In about a week, he's going to be crucified, died, buried, resurrected, then he's going to go up to heaven. And he's still there. He said, I'll come back soon. And 2025 or some years later, 2,000 years later, he's still thinking this is soon. And what's happening in heaven right now? One born of noble birth. Okay, you see what Jesus is doing here? He's telling a story. A man of noble birth goes off to a distant country, have himself appointed king, and then to return. So he called his servants, and he gave them 10 minas. A mina was worth about 3 months' wages. Put this money to work, he said, until I come back. But his subjects hated him, and they sent a delegation after him to say, we don't want this man to be our king. He was made king, however, and he returned home. And then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money in order to find out what they had gained with it. The first one came and said, Sir, your mina has earned 10 more. Well done, my good servant, his master replied. Because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities. The second came and they said, Sir, your mina has earned 5 more. His master answered, you take charge of 5 cities. Then another servant came and said, Sir, here is your 1 mina that you gave me. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. You take what you did not put in and you reap what you did not sow. And his master replied, I'll judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. You knew, did you, that I'm a hard man? Taking out what I did not put in, reaping what I did not sow? Why then didn't you put my money on deposit so that when I came back, I could have at least collected it with interest? And then he said to those standing by, take his mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. Sir, they replied, he already has 10. And he replied, I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. That's not what you expected to come out of the mouth of Jesus, is it? Jesus full of love, compassion, forgiveness, all that good stuff that we like. And he's telling a story. Luckily, it's a story. Which is the tricky part of the parables. You have to kind of decide what directly applies and what's just told to be a part of the story. Because obviously, if Jesus is the king who goes off to be crowned king and then comes back, he's not a wicked king who takes where he did not. Like that doesn't apply. But he does end it with this disturbing scene. And so as we look and we study and we think, okay, what was Jesus trying to teach here? Well, first of all, the story wasn't entirely just completely fabricated. Because actually in the history of the Jewish people, well, long before, about 35 years before the birth of Jesus, King Herod was of Jewish birth, and he went off to Rome to have himself crowned the king. He was given the role and the title of king, and he came back and he ruled as king, Herod the Great. After he died, his son, Archelaus, was a mean and cruel man. He wanted the throne. So he too went off to Rome to have himself crowned the king. The Jewish people, knowing that he was a mean and cruel and violent man who mistreated his own people, they sent a delegate. Like this happened in history. So Jesus is telling this story that's kind of a story and it's mostly made up, but there is a strong historical connection to it. They sent a delegation after Archelaus to say, we don't want him to be our king. And indeed, Rome listened. He was not made a king over the region, he was made a ruler over a group of people. And at that time, then control and authority in the region we call Israel went to complete Roman rule, which raised up the zealots who fought and stirred up people to fight and rebel against Rome. And we see all of the political chaos happening during the ministry of Jesus, and all that political chaos ended up at about AD 70 or so when Rome and the Roman army invaded Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And you kind of have to ask, like they sent a delegation to say, we don't want Archelaus to be king. Could it be that what they got was worse than what they would have gotten if they just would have accepted the king? We don't really know. That's the part with authority, is you never really know what kind of a ruler someone will be. And if you kick out one ruler, if you're going to get a better ruler. That's why we struggle with authority. That's why we struggle with kingship. And that is why we need to hear this story that Jesus is the king we've been waiting for. So let's look at the story here. And when we look at the story, we see a couple of things that are just very clearly taught in the story. Three things, okay? Number one, the guiding assumption is that everyone is under authority. Like I said earlier, everyone in the ancient world, they just assumed, right, that like that kings rule. That's how authority happens. Everyone is under authority. That's the guiding assumption in this story, is that everyone is under authority. And the reason we struggle with it is because we struggle with that idea that everyone should be under authority, and yet Jesus doesn't challenge the notion that everyone is under authority. The second thing we discover is that the subjects were expected to submit to the authority of the crowned king. So here in the story, we see two different groups of people, okay? We see the subjects of the kingdom, and we see the supporters of the king, okay? The subjects are the people who did not want the king to be the king and want his authority, and so they sent the delegation. The supporters were those who said, we support you, we will live under your authority, okay? So the subjects, even that they didn't like him, they were still expected to submit to the authority of the crowned king because he was the crowned king. Number three, the supporters, those who liked the king, those who served the king, those who knew the king already and already been working for him, even the king's supporters were expected to give accountability. That he trusted them, and he entrusted some of his money to them, and he expected them to put it to work and that they would give an accountability. In the story, everyone is under authority. No one gets to do whatever they want to do. And I know we don't like that. We bristle against it. That might be more our problem than Jesus' problem. So much for a starter conversation about the king we've been waiting for. All right, so if most kings just settle for outward compliance, Jesus requires radical surrender. Let's think about what might be good about this. And now you get to fill in the first blank for yourself on the right side. What in your life are you trying to accomplish doing it your way? See, the little rebel in me that wants to do it my way, whether it's because I'm a rebel or because I'm just not sure that I trust you due to my own insecurities and unmet needs. Whatever might be the motivation, what is it in your life that you are trying to accomplish your way? What would it look like to try it the Jesus way? This week, tomorrow. The relationship that you're trying to fix your way. By arguing, debating, convincing that person all the reasons that you're right. And that the Jesus way, in which we look at ourselves first and see where we have been wrong, done wrong, and apologize first. What would it look like to do it the Jesus way? When it comes to your finances and they're a mess and you're trying to dig yourself out of a hole, your way, what would it look like to surrender to Jesus and do it Jesus' way? Oh, Jesus, teach us. Jesus, show us what is your way, the better way. See, I'm going to leave you with some things to think about and consider. All right, let's move on and fill in the next blank here. Most kings suppress momentary conflict, but Jesus the King delivers unending peace. Do you remember early in the conversation, what started all of this right after dinner at Zacchaeus' house is the people were like, this is great, this is wonderful, Jesus is going into Jerusalem, and the kingdom of God is going to show up at once, and we're going to put Jesus on the throne in the temple, and it's going to be awesome, and we're going to kick out the Romans. That's what that meant to them. And Jesus is like, hold on, let me tell you this story about a guy who went off to be crowned king, and he was gone for a long time. Then he comes back, tells the story. Jesus keeps walking towards Jerusalem. He gets on the donkey. They ride into town, and it is this completely clear visual that they see Jesus is king, not riding on a strong, tall horse, victorious after battle like other kings, but still riding into town as the rightful king. They worship, they praise. Blessed is the name of the Lord, the King who comes in the name of the Lord. They get to the end of it. And look what Jesus does. He doesn't jump off the donkey and celebrate and high five and say, yeah, I'm the king. We're going to kick out the Romans. No, look what he does. Look at verse 41. This is amazingly. In fact, if it wasn't Jesus, we'd be like, this is an inappropriate emotional response to the situation, but it's Jesus. So we're going to trust him with it. Look at verse 41. As he approached Jerusalem and he saw the city, he wept over it. And he said, kind of like to the city and all the people, and especially its leaders, if even you had only known on this day what would bring you peace. But now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies, they will build an embankment against you. They will encircle you. They will hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and your children within your walls. And they will not leave one stone on another because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you. You fought for peace, sought for peace through earthly kings who could only suppress momentary conflict. That's all earthly kings can do. And so Rome tried to suppress momentary conflict in AD 70, and they sent the army to do exactly, and they ended up doing exactly what Jesus predicted. In the temple, they literally took every stone and pried it apart from the other stone, because after they lit the temple on fire and the gold on the walls of the temple melted and ran in between the joints and mortar to get all the gold out, they tore it apart stone by stone, completely fulfilling what Jesus said here. And the temple was destroyed. And Jesus, seeing this, is weeping because he knows that he is the only king who can deliver unending peace. But remember though, what they were expecting was a visible king who would sit on a visible throne for all of them to see. And Jesus was like, not yet. I'm going off to be crowned king. And then I'll come back. But until then, I'm going to reign in invisibility, which means the peace that you and I look for is usually a political kind of a peace, a visible kind of a peace. But Jesus specializes in the invisible kind of peace that starts inside of here. And as he puts you at peace, then your relationships can live at peace where he's in the middle of the relationship. And when he's in the middle of your family can live and your home can live at peace, where Jesus, the invisible King, is at the middle of your home. And by chance, a community might figure out how to live with Jesus, the invisible King, as the center of that community can live at peace. And when, if, we hope and we pray, if ever the world could learn to live with Jesus, the invisible King, at the center of everything, then and only then will the world be at peace. And until then, we settle for earthly kings who can just keep the conflict at a minimum. And Jesus weeps because he knows that the rejection of him only means more unrest and violence. And I think of the times when I, over the last 20, 30 years, I tend to follow politics very, very closely and watch, and I have some strong opinions. I just don't always share them from the stage because this isn't the place for that. But I watch and I listen to the rhetoric, and several times on national election nights, watching the returns come in, and I've gotten very anxious and fearful and thinking, oh no, the next 4 years are going to be, I don't know if we can handle this. And I hit my knees and I pray. And Jesus is like, all the votes have been cast already, so unless you're asking me to change, the votes on the pages. Okay, Jesus didn't say that, I just thought that in my head. But my prayer changed. And Jesus said, you can be at peace right now, no matter who sits in the office. Because the peace of Jesus starts in here. And if you, right now, or 1 year ago, living in terror because of what you hear and see by political leaders, could it be that you've built your peace on an insecure, unfirm foundation? And Jesus, the King, could for you deliver unending peace, even in the middle of the most chaotic political, social, cultural environment you've ever seen. That's our King. That's King Jesus. That's why he is the King we've been waiting for. So now you're going to have to fill in the third blank on the right-hand side, asking yourself this: if I were to surrender my loyalty to Jesus and make my decisions his way, what peace could I experience? If God gives you the answer to that right now, write it down. Or maybe you pray over that blank through the week. Because as we said earlier, within the core of our being resides an ancient, persistent hunger to surrender our loyalty to something or someone who is worthy of our complete devotion. And then the third one we're going to think about today, which is going to lead us into our closing time, is this: most kings tremble without praise. Jesus the King embodies divine majesty. Most kings desire and covet praise and adoration so much that they tremble without it, because they too are humans like you and I, who in their unmet needs are building their life on insecurity. And they find a bit of stability through the praise and the adoration of other people. And so here you and I are, being led by kings, queens, and rulers who have their own insecurities, and then us followers and subjects and supporters, we have our own insecurities, and nobody knows who can trust the other. And we have this cycle of unstable, insecure foundations, and nobody trusts anybody. And we default to ourselves and the fear and anxiety that results. But Jesus, the King, He is not unstable or insecure. He knows he is the Son of God and has been for all time, past, present, and future. He knows that he is the King of kings, and he embodies divine majesty. And Jesus, right now, we are told in Scripture, is seated at the right hand of the Father in heaven on his rightful throne. And the angels in heaven are worshiping Jesus, the rightful King, right now. And when you and I show up on a Sunday morning and we begin to sing and we begin to celebrate, we begin to worship, whether it's with a song, with a scripture, or in prayer, that we are giving glory and honor, and we are joining the angels in heaven. Worship team, why don't you guys come on back, because here's what we're going to do. We're going to close out our time. And I'm going to invite prayer team members to come forward so that we can pray and you can be prayed for, and that is good because that is a part of how we worship. But here's how we're going to close out today. We're going to close out today with a time of truly worshiping the King we have been waiting for, the one who embodies divine majesty, who is truly worthy of surrender, worthy of praise, and worthy of all of the worship you and I could ever give to him, because he's the King we've been waiting for. What do you do when you come into the presence of a rightful King who embodies divine majesty? You bow, you kneel, you surrender. Come on, church, stand with me. If you do stand in front of the rightful King, the King you've been waiting for, you stand in respect and in awe. And then you bow and you kneel. And you say, God, thank you. You are the King I have been waiting for. You are the one who is worthy of that full and complete surrender and complete devotion. So here's what we're going to do. Prayer team members, if you guys could come on and maybe just stand at the edges. I brought in the rest of our prayer altars today because I want to have space for everyone who wants to come and to kneel before the King. Whether it's at the edge, in front of the stairs, there's room. I mean, just what would it look like for the church of Jesus in humility to kneel before the King? Jerry, let's bring the lights down a little bit so that we're not looking around at others and we can just give full devotion to Jesus. And the band's going to lead us. I'm going to invite us, church. You do whatever you need to do to kneel, to honor, to worship the rightful King. And if you would like to make use of an altar of prayer where you just kneel and you bow and you cry out and you say, Jesus, you're my King. Jesus, I surrender to you. Jesus, I pledge my ultimate allegiance to you, my King. Oh, Jesus, would you remind me every time I hear a news article that tempts to shake my foundation and remind me of all my insecurities? Jesus, would you remind me that you are the King who can be trusted? And I'm praying today that you're going to walk out of here with a lot more hope and a lot more peace than you walked in with. But a lot of that's going to depend on what happens in the next couple of minutes together. So here we go, church. Let's sing to the King.